Alright, I'm here today to kind of get into how I do some of my sidewalk modeling. So this is a sidewalk only project. I was trying to explain this to one of my colleagues and it was getting a little bit cumbersome, I guess, and difficult to understand because there's a lot of things I've learned over the years of doing these type of projects that kind of help simplify things and allow you to make changes a lot easier. Um, so the example that I'm going to do right now is just between these two returns here. So we've got a driveway here. I just realized I don't have my right-of-way file on, so I should take a look at that as well. And we'll get that turned on. Okay, so we have our right-of-way here. So what we're trying to do is get a sidewalk that runs between the edge of pavement and the right-of-way while also maintaining this ditch. So a couple things I like to do to kind of get started here is I will merge in a few of these some of this line work, and I want to make it so that it's civil geometry and I can put a profile on it. So I'll start by doing some of that, and I'm going to make this topo and right away. Adjust colors. I'll just screen this back a little bit so it's easier to see. And for right now, I'm going to turn this topo off so you can see I've got my lines in here. I've got my drop tool here. Stuff's coming off the screen. So I'm going to try and drop this into its geometry. So it's another thing this does a lot of times with this B-spline. These are curves, and I don't typically like making those into complex elements, so I like having lines and arcs. Let's see, what is this? Turn this construction line off. This looks like an extra line that was sitting in here. Back to the B-spline. So I made this little toolbar here that has some tools that I use all the time. Um, there's this tool called Facet Curve, and it will, I don't want to keep original, but it will basically take that B-spline curve and make it a line string, and I can choose the number of facets I want to make. So I'm just going to choose about 20. And now I have that line string, and I drop that. So it's all in. I like having everything in its individual elements before I rule it and complex it into its own thing. I'm just checking the rest of these lines. Line, arc. Okay. So we've got that, and I'm going to drop these two driveway lines here. And what I want to do is rule some of this stuff. So I'm just going to turn off some things here that make it easier for me to select this stuff. And I like using construction lines, white dash for my edge of pavement. And deselect these two guys. So what I do first is I come in here and I give it a rule first. So I'm basically going to rule all of this, all the dumb lines, that's what I call them, dumb lines, into civil geometry. And then we can go ahead and complex those lines together. Make sure I set automatic. I don't want to do that way. Okay. So now that we've done that, we've got one long complex element here. I can do the same thing. We'll just make these blue dash. Complex those together. All right. So now I can turn my GDTM back on. So I want to set this as, it's already set as my active terrain model. I'm going to hit F4 here. F4 works in the FDOT workspace to open up these 4 different views. So I usually like having a profile model and then a cross-section model, your 3D model, and your 2D model. And I can't look at this white screen. I have to fix that. Illustration shadows. Actually, what do I do? Just kind of click in here and try and get near 140. Illustration shadows. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to take this line here, and I just want to give it. I want to set this active profile as the existing ground. We can do the same with these, because I kind of want to match this driveway as I come through here. We're probably going to end up reconstructing the driveway, but this will give me a better idea of the elevations of this existing driveway that we need to tie to. And then the other line that I need to see is this right of way. So I can just bring in this right of way line, copy it in, and I'm going to stretch it out just a little bit because I kind of want to stay with that. And then we'll just rule that one. It's got a rule and give it a profile so I can kind of see what the profile looks like here at the right of way line. Okay. So I've got everything kind of generally set up here. Turn the alignment back on. The next thing we need to kind of do is look at the template that we're going to be using. So I'm going to open up my template library here. And this is kind of the template that we're looking at. It's got a 2 foot 6 inch unpaved shoulder. We've got a 1-on-4 slope down to the ditch. It looks like this might be a 1-on-3. So these slopes will depend on the design speed of the adjacent roadway and the clear zone that you need to account for. This slope is, yeah, that's a 1-on-4. This looks like it might be a 1-on-6 actually. Yep. So that's what we have here. So we have our ditch. We have our ditch control point. So this is a point I can use to set a point control as with my ditch profile to control the bottom of the ditch. We have our ref point back here where our back sidewalk is going to be. We've got 2 foot flat and a 1-on-4 tie. So I know generally that it's if the center line is here, I'm going to put a new point in here. I need my settings. So I'm just going to put a design template points, templates, null point, and I'm just going to call it CL. And yeah, it's not doing that. I kind of want it makes it easier to snap if you're on these little steps. So I'm going to put that there. So that's basically where my center line is going to be. That's the center of my, this is where the center line is going to be. So I kind of want to move this. Let's see, we can just move it out. I believe it's going to be somewhere near about 24 feet. I like to get it generally where it's close to where it's going to be. Like we might have this back sidewalk alignment moving in and out depending on what we need to accomplish with the ditch and the tie downs at the back. But I generally like to get it somewhere close so that, some of these things actually make sense as we're designing this template. So that should be pretty good. So some of the things that we have to set up is a back of sidewalk alignment horizontally. We need a back of sidewalk profile for the vertical. We're going to need a ditch profile. And we've already got some of the things established, like this pavement EOP out. We're just going to use that construction line's white dash for the edge of pavement that we just created to do a point control for this point. So the way it's set up is everything over here is dependent on this back sidewalk elevation. So we've got our 2% cross slope down for 5 feet of sidewalk. We've got our 1 foot at 2%. Here we've got a 1-on-4 slope down to ditch bottom. And then over here, this shoulder is going to be dependent on that point. So it's 2 foot 6 inch shoulder at 6%. And then we've got our 1-on-6 slope here. So now we need to start setting up some of the things that we need to control the points on this template. So I can go ahead and hit save. And the first thing that we're going to need is a back of sidewalk alignment. So I want to look at this topo again. Looks like we got a fence. Okay, so there's a fence out here, but that's basically at the right-of-way line, so that's okay. I'm gonna say typically, we have a 2 foot flat back there. You can reduce that to 1 or even 0 at times if you can still achieve that 1 on 4 or flatter. Um, and that'll all depend on the client that you're working for and if you're still inside the clear zone. Um, Several factors go into that, but those are some of the little tricks you can do to get as close to the right of way line as possible. But I like to use about 4 feet when I get started, 4 feet off the right of way line. So I'm going to kind of measure the distance here to see where we're at. So we're about 30 feet. So I want to do about a 26-foot offset. And like I said, I'm just creating an example here. So, I might have a 26-foot offset here, but I might need a 22-foot offset in here or something like that. So you want to create a back of sidewalk that spans. I guess it doesn't matter. You could have it stop here, and then the next one picks up here. Um, we can kind of get into that next, but I'll do the first one here, where we just want to. What we want to do. That's in the alignment, I think. So I'm going to do. I don't ever use baseline. Baseline seem to have issues with it for me, so I just always use center line. And I want to do a single offset partial, and I want to basically make sure that everything I do is based off of this center line. So like I said, we're going to go 26 feet, and I'm going to put that here, put that here, and we're going to say no. So now what I need to do is I also need to look at this ditch. So I need to figure out what the ditch bottom elevations are through here. And in order to do that, I kind of want to I'm going to use a non-civil geometry just to start here, but there's a ditch there, and there's a ditch. We're just kind of generally seeing where this thing is. It goes all the way to here, okay? Then we can use our blue dash again. And the reason I didn't use the complex is because I don't want these to be snapped to anything in that topo file. I want them to all be freestanding, so it's just easier for me to have them unruled, and now I can go ahead and rule them and make a complex element, and then we can look at this profile. So this basically gives me what my ditch profile is going to look like, and this one over here. Okay, so let's look at the profile, what the profile looks like over here. So we're generally pretty flat. It looks like we bump up a little bit here as we hit this driveway, so we're going to have a profile that comes through here, and then it's going to rise up to hit the driveway and then come back down. And we can kind of look at maybe look at a dynamic section here using this. I'm going to go left like 50 feet, not even that. 40 feet, and then I want to go right 0, go to 14, 5-foot interval. We can come down here and look at that. 2-foot exaggeration. So we can kind of see that typically all the water is coming from the right-of-way line into this ditch. So what we want to do with our back of sidewalk profile is we need to make sure that this back of sidewalk is lower than the ground at the right-of-way line. So what we're going to do is we'll have some lines that we're going to project back to this center line in order to kind of figure out how we want to do this. I just realized something that I wanted to do here. Instead of having this line just sitting here, I want to go ahead and make a construction line out here. And that construction line is going to be my active with the existing ground as the active profile to help me project things back to the center line. So we're going to single offset partial 26. We can just do this and this. So then that one is going to have my existing ground at my back sidewalk on it, like so. And then I can go ahead and my center line on top of that at a 0 offset. Okay, so I've got that. So now what I want to do is start working on the lines that I'm going to project back to the center line. And this could become sort of an iterative process. So I'm trying to kind of decide how I want to do this, if I want to have these projection lines in this file or in the alignment file. I looked back at another project that I did a sidewalk job, and I had all of these projection lines in the model file, and that probably makes pretty good sense, but I almost think maybe having it in the model file makes more sense, just because it allows you to add more points as needed. So I think what we're going to do, we'll try that method. So before I switch to the alignment file, I just want to recap and make sure I have all the line work that I know I'm going to need. So I have my right-of-way line essentially with a existing ground profile as the active profile. I have my edge of pavement, same thing. I have my driveway lines here, and I have my prospective back of sidewalk location here. So then I can start working on creating this back of sidewalk profile and creating a ditch profile so that we can come back in here and do a corridor. So we'll switch over to the alignment file now. And here we are in the alignment file, so I need to go ahead and start attaching some of the things I've been working on here. So we want to attach my model file here. I'm going to go ahead and just change this to test real quick, just so we can differentiate that between the other ones that were started. Okay, all right, so we got our little section here. So what I want to start doing is, let's see, we need to hit our F4 here again, because I'm going to start designing things. So I like shrinking these down. Now I got all my views set up real quick. And we want to go ahead and start looking at some of this stuff. I like to turn off default 3Ds off. Okay. All right, so let's start working on some of our projection lines here. We can use, we'll use some red dash. Lines, red dash. Maybe. Yeah, did that thing to me where it doesn't want to select it. All right, we're gonna take a shortcut. Click that. Red dash. All right. So we got our red dash. So what I'm gonna do for now is turn off this center line so that I don't get, snapping to that accidentally. So I want to do biangle 90 degree. We're gonna do a 90 degree here. So we're gonna start with the back sidewalk profile. So we're gonna snap to the intersection of this. Go a little bit past and then back to here. And then we'll probably want to do the intersection of the driveway. So this does take a little bit more effort to project this back to the center line, but in the end, it's going to save you so much time. If anything needs to be changed, if you need to change the offset of this sidewalk, you don't have to go and redo the profile because the profile was on the back of sidewalk element. So that's really a big time-saving thing. So what I want to do is start with this one. I'm going to open up the profile view, and I'm going to do profile intersection point for this to that. I could have chosen this. They're both going to give me the same dot because they're both taking the existing ground. So then what I want to do is come over to my profile view. It gave me that location, my profile, and basically I want to bring this back to the center line. So usually what I do is I'll just draw this at whatever angle it's giving me for right now. Make sure it goes all the way to the end. You can set it as active, and then we want to set the slope to 0. So it's basically dragging that point to the center line. So I like to set it active first because sometimes it's hard to get this context menu to come up when it's at 0, because sometimes you're selecting like the distance or something else. So that's kind of why I do that. So then what we want to do is take profile intersection of this and take that point, and it gives us that point there. So now we've successfully projected the elevation from here to here. So what I'm gonna do real quick is finish up the rest of these other 4, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so now I have my 4 points projected back to my center line. The other thing I want to kind of look at is where is this back of sidewalk profile landing with respect to the right-of-way line and the edge of pavement. So what I'm gonna do is get on the same feature as this right-of-way line here, and I want to project that whole profile over to my center line as well. So I'm going to do a profile by slope from element. I want to profile the center line from my right-of-way line, and I want to set that slope to 0. So now I've got that line in here, and I can see where my right-of-way line is. So you can see my back sidewalk profile is basically going to be lower than my right-of-way line for a good distance here. So another thing I'm kind of noticing is I feel like I might need another point maybe here and another point somewhere in here, because you can see we are up here and then we come back down to the road. So what we're going to do is add a few more points here. Maybe I just come in here and say single offset. Let's just offset this like 30 feet. That's a little too far maybe. Let's do 20 feet. Trying to maybe land somewhere around where this ditch ends is probably a good estimate, maybe somewhere in there. And then same thing over here. So let's make this one about 20 feet, or maybe we'll go bring this one to about where the return is, somewhere in there. So that's pretty good because over here we're near the return with the driveway. We'll get another point there. So what we need to do is essentially what we did before. Get this, bring this across, and I'll get these 2 lines added and we'll come back. Okay, now that we've added those 2 extra points, we have an extra point here and an extra point here. So I want to kind of look at what the slope is going to be as I come down. So here's the road, and then it looks like we have a curb here. So we may need to put a curb ramp here eventually, but we'll get into that later. Basically, I want to see like, okay, what is this? This is about 1.6%, and this is about 1.4%. I think that's pretty good for now. If you wanted to make this a little smoother, you could always come in here and maybe offset this about 8 feet or so and create a little bit more of a landing here and then come up. That's an option as well. So the whole concept here is to try is just building your points from your back of sidewalk location along the center line. So that's kind of what we've done here. So like this one I can see is going to be a little bit steeper because we're coming down at 4%, but then we're going to go back up at 2% as we get into the road. So that's something to consider there. For the sake of this exercise, though, I'm just going to leave it at those points there. So what I'm going to do is come back on my, I guess we're on baseline here. That's fine. Come back on my baseline, and I'm going to build this profile. So we're going to build Yes, this is part of the reason I do not like baseline, because it does that. The profile looks funky, so we're going to just switch to centerline. Actually, I'm going to switch this whole thing to centerline. Even though it is a baseline, I like calling it centerline. Okay, so now we're on centerline. Now it's coming in purple like we're used to. We can start building this profile. So you can see I don't have a crazy break over here. 1.4 to 0.3. This is another thing that's kind of up to interpretation as well. Like I've gotten a little crazy in some of my jobs where maybe I offset this another uh, 10 to 15 feet and put a point out here and then make a vertical curve so I have a smoother transition into this driveway and then coming out and back down. But you know, we won't need it here because it's going to be pretty smooth as we come out of here through here and then down. And like I mentioned before, this one is kind of a prime example where you might want to push this point back a little bit more, maybe make a little bit of a landing down here to make this smoother as you go towards the street. And if this is I believe this is curbed. So because this is curbed, I don't have topo attached. Survey topo. So because this is curbed back here, we're probably gonna have to make some sort of curb ramp, and you know we'll have the sidewalk will be here, and then we'll have to kind of wrap this around and extend this curb out a little bit further. So both of these, both of these have curb. So we'll have to take that into account too. So there's definitely going to be a ramp here as we come into here. So your back of sidewalk profile should reflect the usage of a ramp, and you can look at the index to kind of figure out what that's going to be. So you know you might want to model in here like here's the curb, and then you can model in the the gutter and then the back of the curb and kind of build in all of these points so you know like okay, and then I need a landing or a ramp and a landing here. So that will affect your profile. I'm not going to really get into that right now because that's a lot more detailed design and this is more conceptual. So we basically have our profile here, and I want to complex that together. We'll call this back sidewalk left dash one. And I do not want to make this the active profile. What I want to do is make this the active profile because I want to create a corridor using this center line alignment here. And in order to create a corridor, you have to have an active profile. And you can only create a corridor in locations where you have profile available. So if I set this as my active profile, I couldn't do a corridor anywhere else. So we've built that, the back sidewalk profile. The other thing we need to build is the ditch profile. So essentially what I'm going to do is do that in the same fashion as I did before. So we looked at this ditch, and we can look at this ditch profile in here, and it's pretty flat. So I'm going to normalize this, and I'm going to guess that I'm going to have this endpoint, this point here, and this, but I'm going to connect the ditch profile across or underneath this driveway just for clarity. And it may be that I really only need like that point and that point because it's typically flowing from left to right across the screen. So I'm going to pause the video real quick, and we'll come back and we'll have that ditch profile ready to set up. All right, now I'm back, and while I was doing that, I decided to turn on the existing drainage to see if there was a side drain underneath this driveway, and in fact there is. So instead of using the elevation of the existing ditch here, which was let's see, that is 76.74. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. And we want to match, so it looks like there's two pipes here. Um, it doesn't really look like it matters because I can see like the ditch comes down here and it's lower here and then it comes up and then it's supposed to flow all the way down here to this grate, essentially. Um, so it looks like the ditch is lower here. There's probably been some washout or something like that. So we will just kind of match one of these elevations. So I'm just going to pick 7655 and we'll call this one 76.55. We'll just do both of them 7655 because water is going to stage up in here and just pop off and go that way anyway. So if we set them both 7655, water will get in there one way or another. So we want to do this one and 76.55. Put in a line here and we set that as active. I'll fix that point. So it looks like this part of the ditch is, the topo is higher. So yeah, let's see what this one is. 7686, 7586. No, 7686, excuse me. So just clear that out. Profile. Do the same thing. Set as active. Okay. So now we've basically got matched the inverts. We come in here and I'm trying to figure out which feature I want to use. Let's see. I have used pavement. I'm just going to use like a, we'll just use like a PGL left to kind of break up, use a different feature here to kind of differentiate between the two of these. So I can see that the ditch is blue. So we've got that going across underneath the driveway, and then we're coming down to here. So this elevation we have here is 7630. And see this grate, it says 76.5, which is the same as this elevation. So this whole ditch is kind of funky, but if we're matching the ditch elevation, that should give us the storage and capacity that we need, and then that ditch will stage up and pop off into this grate. And it looks like maybe there's a little slot there for water to get into. So as long as we're matching that, we should be good. So we can go ahead and complex this ditch profile, and we'll just call it ditch. I like using caps. Left -1. I got, just make this a capital T while I'm at it. I don't know why it did that. There we go. All right, so we got back sidewalk left 1 and ditch left 1. Cool. All right, so we have the two profiles that we needed to create here. What I'm going to do is go back into the model file now and show how to set up the model in between the driveway and where this ditch ends. We'll start with that. I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are back in our model file. I'm going to call this back sidewalk left 1, since we never named it before. And so really the only thing I need that for is the horizontal location. So what I want to do is come in here and create a corridor, and I want to create a corridor based off of this center line alignment. We're going to go create corridor, right click for active profile, call it Parkway. Well, we'll just call it BSW left, because we'll make a different model file for the other streets. So then we're going to choose our template drop, and we're going to choose that one that I showed earlier. Go. Bug Creek templates test. There we go. Add this guy, and I want to do it. I'll just do it for the entire. Well, this template drop is actually just going to go from here all the way to here where this ditch ends. And you can choose 5 or 10. I'll just do 5. Give it a little better drop. Okay. So starting to see some stuff happening over here. Go ahead and turn off some things here so that we can turn off some of these construction lines. Okay. So now we're starting to see our sidewalk take shape a little bit here, but we basically haven't set anything else up yet. So we need to come into the corridor and start assigning some point controls for this thing. So the first thing I want to do is this point control, and this one I can assign to the entire corridor because that back sidewalk is going to be for everything in between this point, and this is going to be back sidewalk. It's called back sidewalk, and our point is called ref. So ref is usually the point name I use for the reference of the whole thing. And then we just want to do horizontal, linear geometry, and we're going to choose our back sidewalk. So that should kick that sidewalk over a little bit. So now it's out where it needs to be, but it looks like it's a little low because we haven't assigned our profile to it yet. So we can do the same thing. I have the profile built between this red line and this red line. And I should have called the first one, so I'll call this one vert. I should have called the first one horizontal. And this is going to be the ref again, and vertical this time. We're going to click through this linear geometry. So this is one thing you got to be a little bit careful of. You want to click the center line, but you don't want to select the active profile because that's the existing ground. You want to select our back sidewalk left one. All right. So now looking good. Maybe trapping a little bit of water there. So that's something we can adjust here in the future. Maybe we need to add another point or drop one of these points down. Just trying to kind of see what we got here. All right, it's looking pretty good. We got a few more point controls to add here, so we can. I'm just going to do this for the whole length again because I want that. This is going to be EOP exist, and then that's going to be pavement EOP out, I believe, and this one's going to be a both. So we want the horizontal and vertical. We want it to line up with this existing ground out here. So now that's spread out that way. Okay. So the problem is now that ditch is still getting confused because it's in the template it's drawn a little bit too high. So we have to add the ditch profile, and we can really only add it between here where we have the ditch and here. So this is going to be ditch left one and ditch bottom control, and it's just a vertical control. So that, remember, that ditch profile is along our center line again, and we want to go ahead and find that ditch left one. All right, so first thing I notice here is our ditch is a little bit too low for the slopes that we're using. So I like our back of sidewalk. It looks pretty good. All right, so another thing I want to do is I want to be able to see where I'm tying down. So I'm going to come into Explorer, and we're going to open road standards. Click on your file, feature definitions. We're going to come down here to linear, roadway design, and template points. And I want to make my cut PM, go to properties. It's going to pop this guy out. So I want to say create template geometry, so yes, true. And I like to just kind of put this on construction lines yellow dash instead of that feature to make sure it actually shows up properly. And I'm going to take a second to get it to load. So we're going to come into this construction lines yellow dash. Cool. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing with the fill PM. So we're going to turn it, basically turning it on. So yes, we want to see it. Yellow dash. So we can't see it yet. We need to process our corridor before we can see it. All right, so now we got this yellow line out here that's kind of showing me where I'm at. You can see we're going out of the right of way a little bit over here, and we could probably stand to drop our back of sidewalk a little bit in the middle because we're dropping down a little bit too much here. So those are some things that you can go back, and this is part of the iterative process where you're going to kind of go back and start adding some more points and adjusting this profile so that you don't want to be trapping water back here. So you can see we're a little bit trapping water here. And more than likely, I think we're going to be okay here. We could potentially reduce this down to 1 foot and this to like 1 on 3 or something like that to get this to tie within the right of way. Maybe also here that we could make it go straight across and into the slope instead of tying down. That's another option we could do with the template instead of it. Like let's look at that real quick. So like I said, instead of trapping water here, we could just bring this all the way across, and then the water would flow down, hit the flat, come down into here. The real issue here seems to be this ditch. It looks to me like in this middle area, we really have to drop this sidewalk down quite a bit more. So that's what I'll try and do that real quick is basically I need to add another point in there. Let's see what this looks like. So the good thing about ORD is you can actually look at your profile while you're in another file. Yeah, so we know we need to get up to this driveway, and then it looks like maybe we need another point that's here to try and get this down as much as we can. Because we're pretty much set on where this ditch has to be. We're set on where our edge pavement is. So this sidewalk has to come down quite a bit. So we need to, I feel like we are fixed here because of the existing ground. We're kind of fixed here. So this whole spot here is pretty fixed. So we haven't modeled that piece yet, but that one you might have to play with a little bit to get that one to work. But here we should drop this sidewalk down if we can. Maybe come off that another 20 feet or so, give that, and then come down here so we're a little flatter across here. So let me hop into the other file and we'll add that point real quick. Alright, so I'm back in the alignment file and I'm going to go ahead and add an extra profile point in here. Let's come off here. 25 sounds pretty good. There. I should almost drop this down. So this is kind of something new I recently discovered, is that you can actually insert a vertex on your complex element. That. So now we're down significantly lower. And the cool thing is, like, if if I decide I want this to be 20 feet or whatever, slide that thing over. Kind of look at these profiles going up and down here. I mean, 20 is probably all right. Now we should be quite a bit lower there with our profile, and so we can go back into the other file and see how that affected it. And the next thing we might want to look at is potentially modifying that template a little bit to help us accomplish what we're doing here. So we're back. All right, so now we're back in the other file, and sometimes this will auto update for you, but other times you kind of need to do it yourself. So looks like this is one of those times I have to do it myself. Why don't I see my corridor? Oh, it's in there, it's hiding. We're just gonna update this. All right, so now we drop down. Man, this ditch is still kind of overlapping on us. So you can tell a ditch is overlapping when it starts doing that crisscrossy thing underneath. So that means your ditch is too low for it to work with this situation. Yeah, I mean this is part of the iterative process. So like we're pretty much going to have to keep playing with this profile to try and drop it down, and it may be that you can't use the existing ground here. Maybe you have to come in and look at what the existing ground is and actually use the profile by constant elevation on that line to set an elevation there that you want to use, because we could start running into issues where this sidewalk is higher than this, so then if this ditch fills up, it's going to start spreading out into the road. I guess another thing we could maybe look at is trying to push this back a little further. So if we do that, so if I move this, it's going to affect the profile, because now it's not going to be taking the point that is at 26 foot offset. It's going to be taking the point that's at 27 or 28 foot offset. So if I change this line, I then have to go into my alignment file and allow this profile to update, and then come back in here and let the model update. So it's just really iterative, and that's kind of why this can be a little bit frustrating. But using these tools will allow you to kind of test your work out here and ensure that you're doing all the correct things. So one thing I want to try and do is try to maybe like completely minimize this template and see if there's anything we can do in here to make it work. So let's say we wanted to like reduce this to 1. Okay, so we're already at 1 here, and we're already at 1 on 4 here. So we probably want to stick with that 1 on 4. I think maybe if we go 1 on 4 here, it's not going to help us all that much because that's already the lower side of the ditch. We can see if that does a little bit. I've already got this dropping at 6%. So the project that I took this from basically wanted us to kind of put a shoulder on this road a little bit before we went into the ditch. So um, it could be maybe this shoulder is just a little bit too big here. Maybe we have to reduce that to 1 or 0 for this to be able to work, so that we get that up a little higher. Um, we could play with this slope a little bit, but I'm hesitant to make it any steeper than 25% because we're most likely still in this clear zone. I've been told that this roadway is 30 miles an hour, which has a 12-foot clear zone, I believe. So that kind of makes me want to not go too much steeper than that. But since we brought this in 1, we could maybe even bring this into 0 if we had to, since we have a pretty smooth slope back here. That all just depends on the client that you're working for. They may require 2 feet, or they may, realize that we have very minimal space. So it's really whatever typical section you can get approved. As far as that. So the only thing you got to watch out for is if you go less than 2 feet, then you have to be aware of any drop-offs that occur here or over here. You don't want to get into a situation where you've reduced your buffer so much and then you have a drop-off and now you have to put handrail. I have handrail in this template, but it doesn't show up unless I actually target some handrail. So we won't. We're kind of trying to stay away from doing handrail on jobs like this because as you come up to a side street, if you need handrail, then the vehicle has a hard time seeing around the handrail at any traffic coming down the street. You don't really want to put handrail near somebody's driveway for the same reason. So in the job that I'm looking at here, I don't see any reason why we would have handrail unless we came up on some sort of end wall or something like a pipe coming underneath the sidewalk here, and we needed to have an end wall here to get water, like off-site water, or we had a ditch going this way or something like that. That's situations I've had too, where I have an end wall and I have to handle that. So I try and have this 2-foot flat before my end wall, my 2-foot flat to the back face of my end wall, so that I make sure I have the full 2 feet before I even hit that wall. And then I don't need to worry about that drop-off condition. So we've tried to minimize this as much as possible, so let's hit save. And we need to update the template. So we're getting closer. So it may be that in this situation that we're getting real close here to getting down to this bottom of the ditch. So the weird part here was that invert that we had over here. So it may be that we need to like sump this down a little bit. So maybe this ditch needs to come up a little bit. We come out, have a little sump, and then this comes up and flows back down this way. But it doesn't look like it's getting any better here. So the other solution is to kind of get rid of this profile and then change the template so that it's just a V ditch. So it just V's between these two locations. But that's all part of this process, is trying to get all of these things to balance out. That's why it's interesting when people are saying, "Oh, it's just a sidewalk job." Well, this is the hard part of the sidewalk job, is getting something to fit somewhere where it really doesn't. And it can be difficult and frustrating, but if you use these tools, you should have some pretty good success. I could kind of show real quick, like if I wanted to push this out, for example, let's just say I want to do this out to 28. So that moves that out, but I need to go back in. So I'm going to do like a quick flip back to the alignment and back to this file. So all I'm going to do in the alignment file is have it update this profile here. So it's going to update because I moved that out. and then we'll come back here and see how that affects what we're doing in here. So you can see since I pushed that out 2 feet, my ditch is working. And problem is that it's probably going to push this higher up the slope and break it again, but we'll see. So you can see from that flip that yep, it got pushed higher up the slope. So now it's even closer to that projected right-of-way line that we have here. Let's go ahead and process this corridor. So really not too bad. I mean, it's getting really close. That ditch is getting really close to working. So it may be that, this connection underneath here has to be sumped a little bit, or you have to bring the ditch up from the existing elevation to make this work. Another thing you can look at is, we're going outside the right of way a little bit there. Maybe we just do a 1-on-2 here to make it work. And I know, like, in looking at the topo and drainage existing in this spot, survey, drainage existing. Looking at this, we are more than likely going to have to try and get this sidewalk to go around this grate here. So this sidewalk might have to kind of flare out a little bit as it approaches this right of way. So that's another thing we have to consider, is we probably don't want to impact this if we can help it. So like just get an idea of where our front of sidewalk is going to be. So our front of sidewalk is going to be 5-foot offset. So right now that front of sidewalk's kind of clipping that a little bit. So that's going to be a challenge right there to avoid that, where you might have to flare out another 2 feet to get around this piece here. I think that pretty much covers everything that I kind of wanted to show as far as how you project the profile out. That's pretty much the basics, and the rest of this is just iterating and fine-tuning and kind of figuring out what the client wants and what your direction is as far as maintaining this ditch. You need to talk to your drainage designer to determine what kind of capacity you need to maintain in here. Evaluate your clear zone requirements so that maybe you can steepen up these slopes a little bit, and that should help you get this ditch in here. All of those things will vary depending on the client and the standards that you're allowed to use, type of road it is, design speed, all of those things. So hopefully this video is helpful, and let me know if there's any other questions that people are having on this process, and hopefully I can answer them for you. Thanks for watching.